Hello, I will conduct an experiment to determine the actual yield of copper in a reaction of iron with copper 2 sulfate. There are 3 steps in this experiment. Step 1 is to react iron with copper 2 sulfate. Step 2 is to separate the copper precipitate. And step 3 is to determine the mass of the copper precipitate. Now step 1 is to react iron and copper 2 sulfate. Here I have 1.5 grams of iron filings, 8.0 grams of copper 2 sulfate pentahydrate, and 50 milliliter of distilled water. I will now place the 8 grams of copper 2 sulfate pentahydrate in the beaker. And the 50 milliliter of distilled water in the beaker as well. Now I will heat the beaker and its contents on this hot plate. I will not boil the solution, and I will stir with a glass rod to help dissolve the copper sulfate. After all of the copper sulfate is dissolved, I will remove the beaker from the heat. I will now add the 1.5 grams of iron filing to the hot copper sulfate solution. I will let the solution sit for 10 minutes to allow it to react, and I will occasionally stir it. Now step 2 is separating the copper precipitate. As you can see, at the bottom of this beaker is a precipitate of copper. I will carefully pour off only the liquid and not any of the solid into this beaker. I will now wash the sample using distilled water. The mass of this filter paper is 0.9 grams. I will now make a filtration setup. I will now add about 10 mL of distilled water to the copper precipitate. I will now swirl the content and pour the contents into the filter paper. I will now use a wash bottle to rinse any residue of copper into the funnel. After the water runs through the filter paper, I will remove the filter paper from the funnel and place it to air dry for 1 day. Step 3 is determining the mass of the copper precipitate. On the next day, I measure the mass of the dry filter paper and precipitate, and it is 2.6 grams.